He sets himself impossible standards, and he can't live up to them. And in this case, he had decided that he was going to be the crusader. He was going to be wielding the simple sword of truth, as Jonathan Aiken once put it. And in the end, he folded. Before the case even got going, he accepted this settlement and this apology that's been made.
Hello and welcome to The View from 22 for Spectator TV. I'm William Moore, the Spectator's features editor. Well, I'm delighted to be joined once again by Alexander Larman, the books editor of Spectator World, the Spectator's American edition, and the author of several books about the royals, including The Crown in Crisis. And we're going to be talking about Prince Harry's settlement with the Sun newspaper, which is the big news of today, and also all things royal and media. Well, Alexander, it's a very big day indeed because the owners of the Sun newspaper, news group newspapers, have offered a full and unequivocal apology to Prince Harry for the serious intrusion into his life between 1996 and 2011, and they've agreed to pay him substantial damages. This seems, on the surface, that this settlement is a huge victory for Prince Harry, but you've written a piece for the Spectator's website in which you actually take a slightly different line, and I wondered if you could explain for viewers what that is.
Of course. Well, at first glance, it looks as if Prince Harry has won, and won handsomely, because he's been awarded a settlement, and the amount is confidential, but well-informed sources are suggesting it's in the 8 figures, which is going to buy an awful lot of real estate in Montecito. So at first glance, it looks as if, while they haven't admitted illegality, they've offered this full, frank and unreserved apology to Prince Harry. And it looks as if he's got the result that he wanted, except, of course, he hasn't got the result that he wanted, because he was absolutely desperate that this case go to trial. And he's been saying consistently that while everybody else was settling out of court for huge amounts, which has cost News Group £1 billion in compensation, Prince Harry was one of the last 2 people, along with Lord Watson, who was refusing to accept an out-of-court settlement. Because what he said was that I don't see this in terms of money, I see this in terms of principle. I want to have my day in court. I want to have a judge find against News Group newspapers. I want there to be illegality proved in a court of law. Because obviously, had that happened, then that would have opened the door to criminal cases. But clearly, everybody has a price, and News Group have found what Harry's price was.
But could you argue that, in a sense, he has achieved what he wanted to do, in that he's made things quite embarrassing for the Sun? I think even if, as you say, a judge has not declared anything illegal, it's still this moment of, as I say, embarrassment for the newspaper. I think people who support the prince will think much less of the Sun. I'm not convinced they had very high opinions to begin with, but they'll think even less of the newspaper now. So in a sense, has he not won even in a PR sense?
No, I don't think he has, because I think that what you have to see with Harry is so much of what he's done over the last few years. He sets himself impossible standards, and he can't live up to them. And in this case, he had decided that he was going to be the crusader. He was going to be wielding the simple sword of truth, as Jonathan Aiken once put it. And in the end, he folded. Before the case even got going, he accepted this settlement and this apology that's been made. And now there's not going to be a court case. There isn't ever going to be anybody else taking News Group newspapers to the courts, because it's all done. And so, yes, it's cost them a huge amount of money and it's embarrassing, but there is now a line being drawn. And I think that what it says about Harry is that ultimately he has a price like everybody else. And what was important to remember is that if Harry had been awarded a sum that was less than he was being offered in an out-of-court settlement, he would have been responsible not just for his own costs, but for News Group newspapers' costs as well, which would have been millions and millions of pounds. And of course, Prince Harry's finances are something which I'm sure that Spectator readers spend sleepless nights thinking about. But what's undeniably the case is that he's a wealthy man, but without the resources of the royal family behind him, he's not that wealthy, even if Spare made all these millions of pounds for him. So he would not have wanted to have potentially this enormous bankruptcy inducing bill around his neck. And if you're being offered a huge sum of money, yes, you can no longer stand as a crusader for truth, and you can't say, I'm going to fight this case to the bitter end. But on the other hand, you've got a massive, massive payout. You've got your apology. You can sit back and think, right, job's done. Except, of course, it completely negates everything he's been saying for years.
So do you think he was ever serious about being this crusader, about being this maybe martyr for the cause? Or do you think that maybe was more of a tough negotiation tactic in a way? It was a kind of game of chicken.
No, I think he was absolutely sincere. I think he genuinely believed that he was going to stand up in the High Court because he's already done so. I mean, he's a very litigious man, Harry. He likes going to court. He likes having these. I mean, he's still suing the British government. And you have to accept that he's a man who's very keen to have a day in court, to be standing up and actually trying to have things done. But on the other hand, pragmatism has to come in. And perhaps his barrister said to him, this isn't going to work. You're not going to have the opportunity to win because there is a massive, massive risk. And clearly he thought to himself, I'm not going to gamble. I'm not going to have the potential for not having these millions of pounds. So it was a straightforward decision for him in the end, I think.
In what sense do you think that this moment could mean that Harry could move on from his very fraught relationship with the tabloids? There's that quite amazing bit in Spare, isn't there, where he says he's describing Rebecca Brooks, although I don't think he actually names it, but he says that I think I'm getting this right. He says it can't be a coincidence that the woman who pretended that I had gone to rehab, her name is a perfect anagram of rehabber crooks. So the Sun and other tabloid papers, they obviously have weighed very heavily on his mind, over his life. I mean, do you think now we might be entering a new stage of his relationship with the press?
I mean, just to defend Prince Harry for a moment, which is not something you find me doing very often, he clearly has been treated appallingly by the tabloid press, and there clearly is a very strong basis for this animosity that he has. Because if you'd spent your entire life having horrible stories printed about you, which have been taken from phone hacking, you'd feel deeply upset about the intrusion into your private life. But clearly with him, it is not just a case of being given some money and making it all okay. Clearly he blames the tabloid press for what happened to his mother. Clearly he thinks that it's been a horrible thing for his wife and his family. And so I think that even if the money is going to go a very long way into making him feel more content with his lot, he's not going to be a happy man because the tabloid press is still out there. They're not going to be giving him favourable coverage. I mean, if you look at the papers, how they've been treating him, he is not coming across very well. And I imagine the papers tomorrow are going to be quite damning because many of them will be saying, as I have said, this is not the victory that he wanted. This is not the outcome that, as recently as December, he was talking about. So I think that what we have to look at with Harry is what's the end game? And I don't think he wants just to sit back and have a quiet life in Montecito, occasionally playing a bit of polo and having his organic kale smoothies in the morning. I think that he still sees himself as an advocate and he sees himself as an agitator. I wouldn't be at all surprised with some of the money that he's now made, which incidentally, you might have expected him to say he's going to give it to charity, but he hasn't. So whether the Archwell Foundation will be buoyed considerably in their coffers by a donation, or whether he's more likely to give the money to some serviceman's charity, one of the Invictus causes which he so nobly supports, we shall see. Because, yes, I mean, obviously anyone getting an eight-figure sum like this could do with the money, but the stylish thing would have been to say straight away, I don't need the money personally, this is about a bigger cause than I'm going to donate this to X cause, and he may very well still do so. I mean, it's early days, but that would be what I would expect him to do in this situation. Whether he will or not, I don't know.
You mentioned just then the very sad intrusion into the life of his mother, the late Princess Diana, and of course that is something that NGN also apologised for. They apologised for that intrusion. I suppose that probably was a very poignant moment for the prince, because it's something that he has felt so clearly is a great point of injustice in his life.
Yes, I mean, you can see the apology they made would have been very carefully worked out by both sets of lawyers, because you can see Harry saying, right, I want to put about my mother, about press intrusion, blah, 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 because it goes much further than any apology they've made before. I mean, it does suggest, while it avoids saying that illegality took place, it does accept blame and it does accept fault. And the fact that there has been this unreserved apology made in court will be a source of satisfaction to Harry. The question is, once the celebrations die down, will this have been enough? Or will he actually regret not being in court? Because he wasn't due to be in court today, and he might not have been in court for weeks, but he knows that if ever he does appear in a public setting like that, it's going to arouse huge amounts of interest. I mean, just the stories about where he'd stay running the papers for days because he doesn't stay with his father, and he certainly doesn't stay with his elder brother. So we've been robbed of Harry back in our courts, but then there's another case coming up soon, so it won't be too much longer till we see his charming face again.
Yes. Well, one of the reasons given at the time for Harry and Meghan leaving Britain was the way they felt they were being treated by the British press. What is their relationship like with the American press? Is it better than it is with the British tabloids?
No, it's not. I mean, if you've seen the most recent Vanity Fair, Harry and Meghan, especially her, will be taken to the cleaners, because I think what happened is that they moved to America. There was a series of expectations, which in part were engendered by the Oprah Winfrey interview, in which Harry and Meghan were going to be a different kind of royal, because they weren't involved in the royal family anymore. They're going to be seen as these crusading figures who are going to come and make their truth be an important one for everybody. And of course, that hasn't happened. So I think that they're in the strange position that people here are fed up with them. People in America are fed up with them. And it might be the case that in a couple of years, they think, well, actually, we've had what we can have out of Spotify and YouTube and all these various organizations. Perhaps we should go somewhere else. I mean, I hear the Antarctic's very nice at this time of year.
Just finally then, Alexander, on the point about, I suppose, the well of Spotify and other streaming services, what do we have left to expect from Harry and Meghan? The thing coming up, I suppose, quite soon is this other Netflix documentary, the Meghan-led one, called With Love, Meghan. But what is there in the pipeline after that? I mean, what else can we expect?
Well, presumably Harry will have another show, and presumably there'll be another Harry and Meghan show, because if they stop producing their wonderful content, then obviously the likes of you and I would be bereft. But also, they're going to become irrelevant. Now, the Meghan series looks even worse than the Harry and Meghan show, which so upset people a few years ago. And the fact that it's got the most unmemorable title of all time. I mean, I thought it was called Live, Laugh, Love with Meghan. The fact it's just called With Love, Meghan means that we have at least a shorter title. It's going to be bad. There's no doubt whatsoever it's going to be bad. I mean, the only question we can ask really at this stage is how bad? Because every single thing that she has been associated with has been repellent in some way. So if this was to be any different, then it would be the greatest turn-up for the books imaginable, the greatest turn-up since her husband abandoned his case against newspapers. So I don't know what's going to happen, because they are always worried about drifting into irrelevance, because just as the Duke of Windsor and Wallis Simpson, after he abdicated, became frightened of the idea that they wouldn't have a place in the new world, so it is with Harry and Meghan. They're constantly aware that things could go very badly wrong for them, and they could be a forgotten figure. They could be people whose heyday was a long time ago. So you see themselves thrusting themselves into the spotlight at every opportunity, and people are sick of them already. They're sick of them in this country. They're sick of them in America. And I just don't know what's going to happen in the long term.
Alexander, thank you very much indeed for joining me.